Uh, Good afternoon to everybody. My name is Richard Kozel-Wright. I'm the director of the Division on Globalization and Development Strategies. We organize this event every year with our colleagues from INET in New York. And let me begin by thanking the people who have done all the hard work for this meeting. That's Ursula and Maria and Cara on our side, and Heske and Jay on the INET side, because without their effort, we would not be able to put this together. So a real thank you to the work that they've put in for the summer school. This is the 6th of our summer schools. The first 2 were summer schools in person, and then, like everybody else, we went online for the previous 3, and this is now a hybrid version. So this is a slightly experimental. We'll see how that works out. There are advantages and disadvantages to both in person and online, and we're trying to make the best of both of those platforms. And it's important that you give us feedback. I mean, because this is ultimately for your benefit. So any feedback that you have on how we've put this together, I think would be very much appreciated by myself and my colleagues. I'm not going to, we're running late, and I'm not going to say a lot. I think I'm not going to introduce UNCTAD. I'm going to make the assumption that you know about us. It may not be the best assumption. I've just literally come back from Santo Domingo, where there's a workshop of the group of 77 on loss and damage, which is a big issue, as you probably all know, in the context of the climate negotiations in the COP this year. And it's a sad state of affairs, but there's a lot of people in the G77 who come out of a different tradition than the one that we normally talk to. I mean, our audience is more traditionally economic, but for the 77 negotiators on climate, a lot of them don't know who UNCTAD is. So I have to kind of give them a little reminder of why they created us and why we're still relevant today. I'm not going to do that. I assume you all know about that, and I'm not going to spend time doing that. I think the theme of the school kind of reflects not only the current moment, but the kind of work that UNCTAD has done over 60 years. And it's worth remembering that next year is our 60th anniversary. Both ourselves and the G77 will be 60 next year. It's also the 50th anniversary of the start of the new international economic order, which was the high point of UNCTAD in many respects. And it's the 80th anniversary, of course, of the Bretton Woods Conference. So it's a kind of anniversary year next year, and a pivotal one in which all the themes actually that resonated in 44, in 64, and in 74 are the themes that we're still talking about today. The problems of a set of rules of the international game, the international economy that are rigged in favor of advanced economies, the inability of conventional economic thinking to properly handle issues around structural transformation, asymmetries of power that characterize the global economy still, the problems that developing countries have in terms of policy space and fiscal space, their access to affordable and reliable sources of finance. I mean, all the problem of debt, which of course was a major problem already, both in 64 and in 74. So all the problems that we think about today and will be discussed, I hope, in the summer school, are problems that have been around for a long time, and for which UNCTAD has played, I think, a fairly crucial role in framing the debate from a development perspective. And that's what we want to try and do in the context of the summer school. And to kick off, I think very appropriate. It's very difficult for me to introduce Ha-Joon. We studied together. We did our PhDs together. So I've known Ha-Joon for a very long time. I think all of you probably know Ha-Joon and his work, beginning with kicking away the ladder. Well, actually, beginning with the book on industrial policy, which preceded the kicking away the ladder. But you became famous as a consequence of the kicking away the ladder, I think, book, Ha-Joon. And then the Bad Samaritans, the 23 things they don't teach you about capitalism. Was it capitalism? Capitalism, yeah. And most recently, the book on edible economics, which is a very nice read for those that haven't yet picked it up. I mean, what Ha-Joon does is he brings both a historical angle and a very personal angle to difficult economic issues, and uses those experiences, I think, to highlight both the weaknesses of much of contemporary economic thinking, but also the fact that there are alternatives out there in terms of the policy challenges that many of us struggle with. So I think that's Ha-Joon's strength. He is currently the distinguished research professor at SOAS and the University of London. Previously was at University of Cambridge as a lecturer and as a reader, and has numerous other honors to his name, which I won't go through, or through his bibliography, which would take us a long time to go through. So I think the issue is very much the big trends that will be discussed subsequently by you all in the summer school. I think Ha-Joon will set the stage in that sense for the discussions over the next 3 or 4 days. So again, thank you all for coming. And it is gratifying to see people in person for the first time in 3 years or 4 years. So welcome to Geneva. Welcome to a wet and cooler Geneva. If you'd have been here last week, you'd been roasting, I suspect. Ha-Joon, without further ado, what you've got 40 minutes, yeah. And then we'll open it up. We'll open it up to questions and comments from the floor.
Thank you, Richard, for that very kind introduction. I'm extremely delighted to be here. I've had a long association with UNCTAD, starting in the 1990s, and yeah, also with INET, I've done things together. So 2 organizations that I have worked with quite frequently have come together to run this summer school, and I'm very honored to be part of it. Well, the summer school's title is Finance, Growth, Distribution, basically almost about everything. Yeah, but then, at least it's everything that is relevant for economics, because these days, mainstream economists think economics is a study of everything, ranging from how sumo wrestlers collude and how American school teachers cheat. So at least we are going to talk about everything that is relevant for the economy. Yeah, I mean, I cannot really go into anything deeply in the 40 minutes I have. So I have decided to basically make a series of provocative statements on a number of key so-called mega trends that people are talking about these days. But I think the first point I want to make is, a lot of people talk as if the world was okay and we suddenly have this crisis. But actually, the world has not been okay. For the last 4 decades, I mean, we had like major financial crisis every few years. The Chilean banking crisis of 1982, Scandinavian financial crisis of the late 1980s, the Mexican peso crisis, and the Russian crisis, and the Brazilian crisis, and the Asian crisis, and the Argentinian crisis, until we got to the global financial crisis, which has not been resolved at all. Yeah, I mean, just think about it. I mean, in the last decade and a half until the central banks that started raising interest rate following the inflationary pressure, the world has been sustained on a policy that is actually unthinkable under capitalism, if you want to believe that this is capitalism. Yeah? Because the capital market had been basically suspended for the maybe not the entire 15 years, but over a decade when real interest rate was zero. Yeah? And of course, the money only went to the financial institutions, but there was a huge amount of so-called quantitative easing. Yeah? So basically, it meant that the price of capital was zero. Yeah? In the 80s and 90s, the neoclassical economists kept shouting at developing countries, raise your interest rate, that you have repressed the most important price in the world, that is price of money. And these people were completely happy with having no price for capital. Yeah? I mean, we got so used to it. We think that this was somehow normal, new normal, but no, it's not. Yeah, I mean, it's not even capitalism. Yeah, what was it? Yeah. Anyway, so we had been living under some sort of crisis for the last few decades. Yeah, we don't think it's a crisis only because the mainstream academics and the media say it's not a crisis. Yeah, but as far as I'm concerned, I mean, you have this kind of financial crisis every few years, and the income distribution going through the roof, and the xenophobic right-wing parties rising everywhere, and so on. We have been living under a crisis, and of course, UNCTAD and I mean the people who think like UNCTAD have been talking about this all the time, but were dismissed as the doomsayers and the anti-capitalists and whatever. Yeah. So let's get that backdrop. Make that backdrop very, very clear. Yeah? And then now the people are worried about all sorts of these new mega trends. I mean, of course, climate change. Yeah, I mean, I'll get to that later because that's probably the most important thing I want to talk about today. But now the people are worried that all these new technologies are going to abolish jobs. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a rank class hypocrisy here, yeah? Because until recently, economists, journalists, the consultants, all these people used to kind of snigger at blue-collar workers who wanted to, stop the technological changes because they are worried about their jobs as modern Luddites, yeah. Now, why? And they said, the capitalism always go through the technological changes. Why are you worried about jobs? But now these people are all writing about the disappearance of jobs. I think basically because it's the kind of jobs that they have, their spouses have, their children have, their friends have, that are likely to disappear. Huh? Suddenly, they are worried about jobs. Yeah. So I think that we have to be very careful with this because it's so easy to get swept up by this kind of grand narrative saying that all jobs will disappear and that all people are going to be useless. Yeah. Actually, this was already predicted by the American science fiction writer Kurt Vonnegut in 1951. Yeah. This science fiction called Player Piano. Player piano is this automatic piano that plays the music according to this instruction sheet, basically punch cards. Yeah? And Vonnegut, as soon as numerical control the machines were invented, he wrote this science fiction which is set in a future world where everything has been automated. Yeah? And all the machines operate according to this instruction sheet that like, I mean, primitive computer programming that they used to use for play a piano. And in this world, you know, well, at least according to economic, the mainstream economic theory, everyone should be exacting, yeah? Because no one wants immaterial goods, and they have unlimited leisure time. Yeah? But everyone's miserable because they have no meaning in life, yeah? Except for a few managers and engineers. No one has anything to do. Yeah? So, you know, the people have kind of thought about this kind of situation all the time. But why are we suddenly worried about jobs? Yeah, I mean, I think that we have to see through the class politics that behind this. And yeah, this is not to say that these new technologies, whether it's you know, the artificial intelligence or the, you know, new materials or nanotechnologies, renewable energy, that they will not have any impact on jobs. You know, some jobs will disappear, and you know, even though overall the society might benefit from some jobs disappearing, I mean, there are real problems for those who are going to lose jobs. Yeah? So we need to think about this. We need to, you know, think about ways to, you know, retrain and redeploy people. You know, that needs to be linked with the social welfare policy and industrial policy. So I'm not saying that this is not a problem, but you know, this talk of general disappearance of jobs, I think is very misleading. And then another misleading mega trends people talk about is basically the second Cold War. Yeah? The Americans and the Chinese, yeah, kind of bashing it out. I really have a problem with that formulation, because these two economies, Chinese and the US economies, they are like conjoined twins. Yeah, they cannot be separated. Yeah, you know, median wage in the US until a few years ago had not risen for about 40 years. Yeah? And American living standard was maintained only because A, the people ran up a lot of debt, but B, because they were able to import a lot of cheap consumer goods from China. Huh? And if the US stops trading with China, I mean, they cannot maintain this kind of maintain political stability, because the wage earners in the country will be even more hard pressed. Yeah? So there's no way they can do that. So that's why they talk about, you know, reshoring, friendshoring, you know, whatever. But can they reshore these things? Many of these things won't be viable given the American wages. Some industries may be brought back, but it's not going to be easy, because the deindustrialization of the United States has been going on for the last 4 decades, if not longer. And in the meantime, they have destroyed what some economists call industrial commons. Yeah? It's not enough to just bring back the factory. Yeah? You need the workers with the right skills, supplier firms with the right levels of technology. Yeah? You need researchers in local universities who do customized research for whatever you are doing. I mean, the optics or the biochemistry or whatever. You have destroyed all this, so you cannot bring these things back even if you want it. Yeah. And sometimes it might be technologically feasible to do it, but it doesn't make economic sense. Yeah. And I still remember a few years ago, there was a big headline in the newspaper saying that Adidas, the German the maker of trainer shoes, have invented this process that can make trainer shoes without a human touch from beginning to end. Yeah. So they say, oh, now China, Vietnam, they are all going to lose these jobs. Yeah. Last year, I saw that this project was quietly folded. Yeah, not because it was technologically unfeasible, but it doesn't make the economic sense. I mean, it's a sad thing because people are so cheap that it's actually better not to mechanize. Yeah. So I'm not saying that this is necessarily a good thing, but for a lot of things that it doesn't make economic sense to mechanize. Yeah. So, however much that the U.S. and its allies want to take things away from China, it's going to take a long time and a lot of investment and a lot of policies to fix the situation. Okay, I mean, Intel is supposed to have be building its first semiconductor factory outside China in 15 years or 20 years or whatever in Malaysia, but how many of those factories can they build? Yeah, how quickly? Yeah? So this the dependencies are going to last long. Yeah? Also, China, already owns 13% of U.S. Treasury bills. Yeah, you cannot sever a relationship with that kind of country in the way that some people think that the U.S. Is able to and willing to. No, it's not going to happen. Yeah. So really, the only area where this the China-U.S. confrontation is real is in the area of high-grade, military-grade microchips. Yeah? And there is that the U.S. is doing its best to prevent the Koreans and the Chinese not to sell these chips to China, prevent the Germans and the Dutch not to sell the machines that can make these the microchips to China. But my suspicion is that maybe it's well, it's definitely kind of not a given that the US will be able to succeed even in containing China in that field. Because, yeah, if they wanted to do this, they should have done it 10 years ago. Huh? Now China's, of course, are still well behind, but close enough that actually this might prompt China to catch up faster in these areas. Huh? So let's see, I'm not making any predictions here, but it might even help China develop the technologies. Yeah? And the Chinese, they know what the game is. So they are now, Xi Jinping has appointed like 5 technology czars to organize catch up in the main technological areas with the US. And yeah, in some areas, China's kind of almost equal to the US. Yeah. I mean, AI, the renewable energy, nanotechnology, there are areas where they are almost at neck and neck with the US. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, as the good Korean, I really dread the day when the choice given to us is the AI made by, Chinese geeks or American geeks. But, that's I mean, something else that we don't know how this technological race is going to end. Yeah? I mean, US is, of course, pouring in a lot of money into this, but I mean, can they really reverse the last 40 years in most areas? I don't know. Yeah? And then there's the issue of finance. I've already talked about the sort of the permanent financial crisis, if you like, yeah, that we have lived through in the last 4 decades. But things have become even worse with the rise of financialization. Yeah? So it's not just kind of financial liberalization that increases the chance of this financial crisis, but also the permeation of the financial logic into everything, which some people call financialization. And this is seriously affecting our abilities to invest, especially for the long term. Yeah? I mean, the most telling statistics have been provided by Bill Lazonick, the American economist, and his associates. And basically, yeah, the exact numbers that differ depending on exactly which study you look at. But roughly speaking, in the last 2.5 decades, the top US and UK corporations gave away somewhere between the 85 and 95% of their profit to shareholders in the form of dividends and share buybacks. Yeah? And even in the European countries where the shareholder powers are weaker, 60, 70% of profits have gone to the shareholders. Yeah? I mean, the US always had a high share of profit going to shareholders rather than being retained in the corporations. So according to study by Jim Crotty, which is an old teacher at the UMass, you know, it had that much higher lower profit retention rate, but even then, until the 70s, US corporations retained around half of their profit. Yeah? Now it's basically 5%. Yeah? I mean, what are you going to do with that 5%? Because, what can you do with that 5%? Because the most important source of the investment financing in the advanced countries is retained profit. Yeah? So you used to retain half the profit, now it's only 5%. Yeah? It's seriously affecting the way that you can invest, especially for the long term. And this has created a lot of inequality. Yeah? Inequality, especially based on the more kind of rentier kind of activities rather than productive investment. And inequality has become so normalized that we, I think the best example of how inequality has been normalized, high levels of inequality has been normalized, is during the COVID pandemic, you had literally millions of people dying because they didn't have enough protective equipment in the hospitals. There was a lack of oxygen. Yeah, I mean there were not enough the people working in the old people's homes and so on. And at the same time, these tech billionaires were having private space race. Yeah, and that contrast, I mean, it was of course mentioned, but that didn't spark a whole series of outrage and social revolution. Yeah, no, it should have. Yeah, I mean, these people are literally burning billions of dollars for their hobby, while millions of people are dying. Yeah. So yeah, we have now reached the situation where this dominance of finance is, not only creating so much inequality that it has become normal to have this kind of inequality. Don't forget that there was a time in the 1960s and 70s when most European countries, including Britain, had Gini coefficient, which was like 0.26, yeah, 0.24, yeah. I mean, some of these countries are even more equal than Eastern European countries, yeah. And now, I mean, that you think that this inequality is essential in maintaining our system. We need to ask questions about that, yeah. Okay, and finally, the climate issues. I've started doing some research on the climate issues, but I'm not an expert on it. But from my point of view, as a development economist, I think the biggest challenge is, I mean, how we make this transition to another economic system where ecology is not just climate, because it's also about resource depletion. It's also about biodiversity. So also about the pollution. How we make a transition to this system in which ecology and socio-economic needs are balanced, while enabling developing countries to have more sustainable socio-economic development. Yeah? And it's not simply about reparation and loss and damage, which I fully support. But it's also about, I mean, to put it a bit bluntly, how not to make renewable energy the second oil. Yeah? You know, for example, the Germans have invested billions of dollars in Namibia to build all these solar farms. Yeah? The plan is to make hydrogen out of those solar energy, and then ship it back to Germany, maybe sell to the Koreans. But when you do that, what's the difference between that and French oil company going to Equatorial Guinea and pumping oil out? Yeah? So now renewable energy is in danger of becoming the second oil. Yeah? And then there are all these critical minerals that are supposed to be used for the new generation of the electric and hydrogen vehicles. But once again, it would be the same, digging the stuff up, doing minimal processing that will allow export, and then leaving nothing behind. Yeah? And also that you know, once again, we are coming back to the classic themes of UNCTAD. You know, that kind of arrangement exposes developing countries to extremely high degree of vulnerability. Yeah? You know, for example, at the moment, Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, I mean, they are having a small party because they have lithium, yeah, which is supposed to be like the best, material for the car battery. Yeah? I mean, recently, there was an announcement that from a Chinese company saying that they have developed sodium battery. Yeah? Of course, there's a very intense technological race going on now, so you don't know exactly what is going to win. But what if the sodium battery wins? Then lithium won't be very valuable. I mean, they say that lithium is still the best material, so yeah, probably they'll use it for the most expensive cars, but the general production might be done with sodium. Then the lithium won't be that valuable. Hmm? And I recently saw this article that in the, totally by accident, in the website of Princeton University, saying that there are two professors in Princeton, one German, one Chinese, who are doing research on finding alternative metal they could use instead of platinum in order to make the electrolysis the system for hydrogen production. Yeah? I mean, South Africa owns about 80% of the world lithium reserve. So it's the kind of, I mean, there are lots of other problems there, but that country is very hopeful that this will give them a big boon if the hydrogen batteries become more widespread. But these Princeton professors are saying that actually we have already identified a couple of other metals. I mean, of course, it's still some way away from commercialization, but couple of other metals which are definitely much less efficient than platinum, but so much cheaper that actually this will be more economical. Yeah? So what will happen to South Africa when that comes on stream? Yeah. So unless you control those technologies, developing countries are not going to be able to sustain their prosperity on the basis of these the minerals, yeah, or renewable energy or whatever. Yeah. I mean, the key is to control the technologies, and in order to control the technologies, that you need to develop your industrial capabilities, because that's where most the industrial sector, manufacturing sector is where most of the technologies come from. Yeah, and yeah, we've seen time and again. Yeah, I mean, Chile was well, first Peru and then Chile was very rich on the basis of bird guano, which was used as fertilizer. Yeah? The Germans invent artificial fertilizer by inventing a process to fix the nitrogen from the air. That became worthless. Yeah? Guatemala used to have quite a good life on the basis of this the natural dye called cochinilla. When the English and the Germans invented organic chemistry, that disappeared. Yeah? You know, we have seen so many of these things, and we don't want this ecological transition to force the developing countries to repeat that again. Yeah. So how do we help these countries? How do these countries take initiatives to develop the industrial capabilities and hopefully innovative capabilities in the new technology sectors? Yeah? And then we get to discuss the tools of industrial policy, but mostly importantly, policy space. Yeah? Because if they are going to do that, they need to use a lot of policies that will violate the WTO and other free trade and investment agreements, rules from other free trade and investment agreements. Yeah? Of course, the rich countries are already breaking them. Yeah? The American IRA is basically breaking local contents requirement, yeah? Which is banned by the WTO. Yeah? The CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism of the European Union, is also in the violation of the WTO rules. Yeah? But you know, they just do it. Yeah? Yeah, and also the thing you have to realize is that the WTO itself doesn't police. Yeah, the kind of the damage that the party has to take it to the WTO is very expensive. Yeah, very complicated. So you know, the rich countries basically sue each other and other kind of key developing countries. But when they violate, they basically let others be, huh? Because they also have a similar skeleton in the cupboard. Yeah. So while these countries violate these rules, center, left, and right, the developing countries are more and more constrained in their ability to get into these new technologies, especially climate technologies. And then they have the conditionalities attached to loans and the grants, yeah. But also that with their debt problem, they can mobilize the long-term finance. Yeah? So what will come out is that even if we meet all the aspirations of COP and so on, what will happen is that developing countries will be basically given these technologies, yeah, maybe at a slightly subsidized rate, and basically be told that you have to make do with this, but you also have to reduce your carbon emission, and therefore you should basically reduce the speed at which you develop your material production capacity, and then we will be basically back to the old regime. Yeah, I mean that the center countries will control the technologies, developing countries will basically be recipient of these technologies and their development paths that are controlled by what these the center countries define as planetary boundary. Okay, let me stop there. I want more time for discussion, so I just have thrown at you a series of rather provocative statements. So please make any comments and answers when you have.
Ha-Joon, great. Thank you very much. I think you've thrown the kitchen sink at these people. Mm-hmm. So the floor is open. I should say that Ha-Joon is actually writing a paper for us at the moment that should be out later this year on what he calls the 3D policy challenge, which is decarbonization, dematerialization, and development as the 3Ds. And that I hope we'll put that out next year. I mean, behind all this, of course, there's a big issue, which I'll throw it out, but it's not a question, about how your analysis relates to the popular discourse of the moment, which is the polycrisis, to describe these what are increasingly I mean, I have a problem with the polycrisis as a way of framing contemporary challenges, particularly from a development perspective. But it is the way in which a lot of this stuff is being presented. And I just wonder how you respond to that discourse, which has elements obviously in common with what you said. But I'm going to open it up to comments, questions, and if you can introduce yourselves, because I do know some people in this room, but not a lot of you. So if you could introduce yourselves too before you ask your question or make your comment.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation, Aaron. While you have two questions, first is when you mentioned, okay, my name is Bimisola Oshadwa. We did an introduction earlier. My name is Bimisola Oshadwa, a PhD student at the University of Geneva, researching on African trade, focused on the African Continental Free Trade Area. And as part of a project for my research, next month, I'm going to be hosting a session at the WTO on a green trade agenda for Africa, focusing on Africa's climate mitigation through transformative trade approach. So from that, the part of your presentation where you had mentioned about the WTO rules and the fact that some of the maybe agreements coming up now are more or less like not in line with those rules. So would you want to take a position from your experience or from your research so far that the WTO rules are outdated? Because those are some of the debates we're going to be having next month at the WTO. And because the theme of this year is at the intersection of trade and climate change. So would you say those rules are outdated? That's on one part. And this other part of my questions is with respect to what you mentioned about developing countries being given the technologies at highly subsidized trade. But my main attention is with respect to how policy and regulation, even at national level in developing countries, now I'm speaking in the context of Africa, can support small businesses in this green transition, especially knowing that green is expensive. So like how policies, regulation can support this. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll take two or three questions, and then I'll give the floor to Ha-Joon. Yeah, and then these two in that order.
Hello, thank you. My name is Rafael from Brazil. I wonder, thank you for presentation, for the keynote. I wonder, what is your opinion if we can do everything we need to create a more development, equality in the world, and win the climate change problems under our way of production, capitalism, that we work through, the way of production that based on accumulation and so on and so on. If you can do this under this way of production, or we should think out of the box, think like other ways of production and other logics. So this is my question. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Arzu Ulusoy-Shipstone. I am coming from Turkey. Is it better now? Okay. My questions are actually in two folds. One of them is, which I was hoping to hear from you about the debt crisis that currently the Global South is facing. And what do you think in the concept of all the other things that you said about how it is going to affect the developing world? The second aspect is that what will be your menu of new industrial policy for the developing world, especially in the context of diversity that they need to embed into their economies if they are going to sustain the development path for themselves. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, well, huge questions. Well, Richard, first of all, on poly crisis, one thing we have to ask is crisis from what point of view? Because if you ask this question to, I don't know, many Chinese businessmen, they'll say, what crisis? You know? So poly crisis is a very kind of Eurocentric, well, Western-centric kind of the description of how things are. But yes, I mean, I do agree that you know there is this conflation of crisis at the moment. But was the world ever free of the poly crisis? You know? Once again, I mean, if you, I don't know, went back to say the 70s, you know, you had the oil crisis and the stagflation and you know the troubles in the Middle East and you know, I mean, I think that it's not really unique, you know. So I'm not saying that these crises that people who talk about poly crisis are unimportant or non-existent or anything like that. Yeah. But are we really living in a unique period of time? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think it's that because basically coming from the Americans feeling that the world order they had built and yeah, with ups and downs maintained might be kind of crumbling. That probably creates this sense that this is a period of unique period of crisis. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's that unique. I mean, we have lived with that many different crises, you know, and a lot of it depends on who you are, where you stand. You know? Is the WTO outdated? Well, I mean, all organizations are to an extent outdated because they first are set up for certain purposes and then the world changes. And so what is really important is whether the organization can adapt itself. I mean, the WTO potentially has the good DNA because it's one country, one vote, not like in the World Bank and the IMF. Yeah. But then that's exactly why the Americans and the Europeans have basically pulled out of it. Yeah. Because they thought that they could bully the developing countries into basically agreeing to do whatever that they are told to and never take vote. Yeah. And for a while it worked. Yeah. And then developing countries realized that this is a rotten deal and they started refusing to kind of follow the line. And yeah, now the Americans don't, I mean, Americans have been disengaged with it at least for the last 10 years. Yeah? Europeans are increasingly disengaging with it. So, you know, in that sense, it's becoming more and more irrelevant. But yeah, I mean, there's the potential, the good DNA of being genuinely kind of the democratic, the only the democratic the global institution. Of course, you can ask whether China with 1.3 billion people and the Estonia with 1.3 million people having one vote each is democratic, but at least it's better than the IMF where and the World Bank where the key decisions require 85% supermajority, and the US, I'm sure it's a total accident, happens to own 18% of the shares. These transitions and the climate transitions and the small and medium-sized enterprises, I think the energy transition potentially can give advantage to SMEs in the developing countries, because now energy system is can be more decentralized. Because in the old days you had these big power stations, grids, and so unless you are hooked up to the grid, that you don't have the energy with which you need to organize your production. But now you can have this smaller power sources with wind and the solar radiation and so on. So that's a potential benefit. But then, of course, these countries, these enterprises lack the resources and expertise to take advantage of these opportunities. So I think what we need is to provide financial support and technical support to these firms. I mean, if you want to develop SMEs, you need bodies that public or semi-public bodies that provide bulky inputs to them, whether it's the export marketing or research and development or the technical advice. So the Germans have the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft, the Fraunhofer Society that provides this technical and manager the consultancy, if you like. Taiwan has the ITRI Institute for the Technology and I forget the acronym, but the full name. That did that for a lot of small firms. The Danes succeeded with their agriculture export because the government set up this export marketing agency and so on. So you need those supports. To the Brazilian colleague, yes, I mean, capitalism is at one level responsible for the climate destruction, but politically speaking, I think it's very helpful to talk about the abolition of capitalism because there's no realistic alternative. By talking about abolition of capitalism, we are actually distracting our attention to what actually can be achieved within the framework of capitalism. And just think how capitalism has been modified to a huge extent. Even today, a lot of Americans think that the European countries are socialist. And if you brought a 19th century American to today's America, he will call it a socialist country. Because you have restrictions on what you can own. You cannot own slaves. You have restrictions on how you can make money. You cannot hire child labor. They have restrictions on your property rights. I mean, that you may own a land, but you cannot do anything everything that you want with it because there's urban zoning law, restrictions on pollution and what have you. There's income tax, God forbid. So, there are actually a lot of things that we can do to kind of modify how the world economies, our economies are working within the framework of capitalism. So I think it's that I mean, unnecessary political distraction to talk about, abolishing capitalism, because it's not going to happen anytime soon. Yeah? If you have time to discuss that, let's spend the time to discuss realistic alternatives. Yeah? Debt crisis, yes. I mean, I think that we are in danger of repeating the 1980s. Yeah? And this is a serious issue. I mean, the debt market has become even worse because of the existence of all these vulture funds, and UNCTAD has been talking about the introduction of country bankruptcy laws. In the same way, we have the bankruptcy laws for the corporations and individuals in the individual countries. But the international country bankruptcy law has, I mean, we've talked about it for the last at least 50 years, but it's not happened. Yeah, so I don't know that it will become even worse if it happens this time. So I think the only solution is a major writing off of that. Yeah, I mean, otherwise we can push a lot of countries into this very, very destructive debt and austerity spiral again in the coming years. What kind of new industrial policy do you need? I mean, well, I think I wasn't completely sure about that your comment, but you mentioned the issue of diversity. So probably you are referring to the fact that the industrial policy can and does inevitably favor certain groups, and therefore politically weaker groups that might be damaged in the process. Is that what you meant?
I meant more like the avoiding the path dependency in terms of choosing one route and favoring only one sector. Maybe more about diversifying the policy options around it, and how do you actually structure the economic system in general?
But there's no magic to it, but you need kind of, if you like, portfolio management. Yeah. So in my view, all countries should have maybe one or two sectors where they really want to make it big, but it's risky and it might take a lot of money. You should have some of those, yeah. Because if you're not ambitious, you will never achieve anything. Yeah? But then you have to accept that that's the cutting edge, yeah, and the mainstay of your industrial policy have to be something related to existing capabilities, existing natural resource endowment, your kind of worker skills or whatever, yeah. But then you always have to think how you get out of some of the lower end of these, yeah. Yeah, so if you look at for example, what Korea did, in the 1950s, Korea was entirely dependent on the export of natural resources. I mean, that's where I come from, but we are so little of it. We had $70 per capita income, yeah. There's very little to sell, yeah, some fish and seaweed, yeah, and a bit of tungsten. That was about it, yeah. So it started getting into new industries in the 60s. I mean, in the beginning, it did the worst things, yeah. I mean, making trainers for Nike and these people. Actually, in the 80s, South Korea was producing 90% of world Nike output, yeah. We are stuffing toys for American department stores. We are making T-shirts, yeah. Making wigs with human hair, yeah. I mean, the cheapest things, yeah. And then we moved on to slightly better things like making cheap transistor radios, assembling black and white TV, making plywood, yeah. But you keep upgrading until you reach the mobile phones and semiconductors, yeah. So, but the country never, the country had the ambition to compete with the biggest boys, yeah, in the most the high-tech industries, but it never tried to do it in one jump, yeah. I mean, you have to continuously build it up. So while you are exporting wigs, yeah, you buy machines and technologies to get into electronics. Yeah? While you are exporting cheap electronics products, you buy machines and the technologies to get into automobile. Yeah? While you are selling cheap automobiles, you use the export proceeds to buy, you know, the technologies for semiconductors and so on. So yeah, you need this kind of balanced portfolio approach, if you like. Yeah? If you are trying only easy things, you will never make it. Yeah. And you have to accept that you will fail, because as the Americans say, if you are not failing, you are not trying hard enough. If you are not failing, you are not trying hard enough. Yeah. But you have to be realistic and say, we cannot put all our baskets in, yeah, some future high-tech industry. Yeah. We have to do the basic things. We have to do the medium things. We have to do the high-tech things. Yeah.
Let's see.
Try to listen.
Let's try. Let's just before that, if you want to understand the history of the polycrisis, read Michael Franzak's book on global inequality and American foreign policy in the 1970s. Because, I mean, as Ha-Joon said, you know, multiple crises are nothing new. In the 70s, you had a food crisis, you had a debt crisis, you had an energy crisis, you had a finance crisis, all the crises that Tooze and other people talk about as somehow indicative of the current era defined the 1970s. And of course, we have a certain nostalgic kind of commitment to that, because that was the golden age of UNCTAD. That was the origins of the new international economic order. And ironically, if you read Franzak's book, and quite shockingly, Henry Kissinger comes out as a good guy in that story, which is quite impressive in a way. But it's a book that's really worth reading in terms of, and some of you, and Michael was actually a lecturer at the summer school, I think in 2019 or 2020, I can't remember. An interesting book. Okay, I will start here, and then Chantaline, and then we'll just see what happens.
Hi, Yanis from the New School for Social Research, Jens Guediotis. So thank you very much, Professor, for the talk. It was really fascinating to hear all of this. If I'm allowed to make a comment, which will hopefully lead to a question. What we see, we observe the uneven development, how international competition works. That's part of the megatrends, the unevenness. So in the first level, also from the perspective of capitalist competition, it makes sense for developing economies to kind of resist this madness of trade liberalization, the deregulation agenda, or in a sense, this Panakia view on what trade can do, both economically and socially. But there comes a second level to the discussion, perhaps from a more critical perspective that doesn't necessarily throw the ball in the outside the field saying, well, it's outside capitalism, or it's like within the system. To the extent that we learn from past experiences of successful capitalist development in the periphery, and to the extent that we learn from history, either to repeat it as a tragedy or a farce, there are some people, there are some scholars that are quite critical, for example, even for the East Asian miracle, and they kind of focus on the question of labor. And my question would be, what has changed? This class which existed, this class imbalances, because you also mentioned class in your presentation, which I found very interesting. What has changed? What can we do differently this time? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for this presentation. You mentioned to addressing the triple environmental crisis that we need to transition to other economic model systems. You also said we should not waste our time trying to get out of capitalism. The General Assembly just passed a resolution on social solidarity economy, which is capitalism, but with socialism that doesn't maximize profit. And I'm actually just coincidentally reading a book on challenging the fact that Adam Smith was the father of capitalism and instead he's the father of social solidarity economy. Can I get your insight on this? And what is the other economic model according to you? Is it in that direction?
Yeah.
Hello, sir. Thank you so much for your presentation. Just a quick doubt that we have been talking about the crisis is not very new in capitalism. And I mean, I'm just keeping aside the climate crisis for now. And what do you think would be some of the typical characteristics of crisis in neoliberal era compared to crisis earlier? Thank you.
Powers that are bestowed on me as the chair of this session. Yeah, one.
Thank you very much. My name is Nat Tanpanit from the Mission of Thailand to the WTO. Sorry, it's on. It's on. It's not on. Hello.
Now you turned it off, I think.
Okay. All right. Good. Okay. My name is Nat Tan Pandit from the Mission of Thailand. But my intervention here is under my own capacity, nothing related to my missions. So I work with the WTO, covering trading goods and WTO reform. I have one comment and one quick question for Ha-Joon. My comments about the WTO rule books, and in my personal opinion, I think that the rule books of WTO is quite outdated, and its ambiguities that of the rule books has led to a lot of never-ending debates. I think Ha-Joon has mentioned about the Second World War, the reshoring, the developed country bring back industry into their own economies, but they have to develop their technologies, skilled workers, and that is the reasons why, they have injected a lot of, financial support to develop, to help their own domestic industries, to keep up with the modern challenges in the modern world. Now, say and the rule books, say for example, the subsidy agreements. I think it is quite outdated and ambiguous. Say say for example, definitions of public body is not mentioned, and this is something that has led to hot debates between big economies recently. And also my questions is about thanks to our colleagues from University of Geneva. Later this month there will be the retreat, the WTO reform retreat in September. And there will be a talk about a paper that put on the table by African group that asks for more policy space. And my take on this is that, developed countries, based on my experience working there, developed country will totally reject the proposal by African group. If I'd like to ask you for your comments. If you were a representative from African group talking to developed country, how would you convince them that policy space is needed, and how would we get around the claim by developed countries that developing countries always take and don't give? Thank you.
Is reshoring just import substitution by another name?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I mean, just import. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a form of import substitution.
Yeah. I mean, I think the only difference is that when you talk about reshoring, there's kind of implication that you used to do it yourself before, and then you lost it and you want to bring it back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, it is import substitution. What else? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's approach. Bring some of your questions together. Well, first of all, capitalism. Yeah, I mean, capitalism has some core characteristics. Yeah, so for me, it's the predominance of the private ownership, economic activities mainly, although not entirely, the coordinated by market, and the existence of wage labor. Yeah, but even when you keep those key characteristics, there can be many different ways of modifying them. Yeah, and if you look at the real world, I mean, you know, in many European countries, I mean, of course, some of it is the government-mediated transfer rather than real spending. But you know, in many countries, over half of GDP go through the government. Yeah? I mean, in Singapore, 90% of land is owned by the government. You know, state-owned enterprises that produce more than 20% of GDP in that supposed free market economy. Yeah? I mean, in not anymore, but in Korea, in the until the late 1980s, the restrictions on your consumption was so severe, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, foreign travel was banned altogether. You know, import of luxury consumption goods that were banned, and in those days, definition of luxury consumption goods even included cookies. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can have many different types of capitalism. Yeah, I mean, in the 80s, until the 80s, all the banks in Taiwan, almost all the banks in Korea, the majority of banks in France used to be owned by the state. Yeah. Yeah, so you know there are many different ways of putting these things together, and I think giving it some kind of title is less important. Yeah? I mean, if you are in doubt of that proposition, try to ask whether China is a socialist country or capitalist country. Yeah? It's probably capitalist, at least according to my definition. But you know, even if it's socialist, calling it socialist, does it matter? Yeah. What matters is the substance. Yeah. So we really need to decide how much and where, through what means we want to control private property. Yeah? We want to discuss how much that, if you like, what some people call social wage that the workers should get. Yeah. Because it's not just the wages that they get from their employers that determine their standard of living. Yeah? Welfare, the state provision, access to basic services, yeah, rights to the certain level of decent treatment at workplace, and all sorts of things. Yeah. So we need to discuss that rather than saying whether we should abolish wage labor or not. Yeah. I mean, if you put enough restrictions, probably even without formally abolishing wage labor, I mean, the labor market wouldn't work like the classical the capitalist labor market. Yeah? I mean, after all, these the bunch of modern day capitalists abolished the capital market for the last 10 years. Yeah? By bringing interest rate down to zero. Yeah? I don't call it capitalism. Yeah? Because the most important market, capital market, is still functioning. Yeah? So I think that we need to be less bound by these categories. Yeah, yeah, and that brings me to the question of whether we can treat workers differently. Yeah, even when we are doing capitalist development. Yes, we can. Yeah, we should. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, in many countries, that trade unions have become so weak that now we are witnessing the kind of emergence of the labor market that look more like 19th century Britain or the 1960s South Korea. But of course, these things can be modified. Yeah? I mean, if you gave workers the right to strike, I mean, if you increase social wages through welfare provision and giving greater access to social services and so on, the labor market dynamic changes. Yeah? So I really appeal to you to think about concrete measures that you can take rather than getting fixated on the categories. Yeah. Yeah. So does it mean that we should resist trade liberalization, deregulation? I mean, whatever capitalist countries are supposed to do. Once again, I appeal to you that we have to think in a more complex way. Yeah. Because liberalization of trade, I mean, liberalization in which areas, over what time frame, yeah? According to what conditions, yeah? Because the most important protectionist argument, the so-called infant industry argument, invented by none other than the first finance minister of the United States, Alexander Hamilton, the first Treasury Secretary, says that you eventually have to liberalize trade only when your producers can compete in the global market. Yeah? So my view is that countries should liberalize in the end, but that should do it according to their own timetable, according to their own needs, according to their own capabilities. Yeah, because that you need trade. Yeah, I mean, if you're a developing country that cannot generate your own technologies, then you, in order to develop your economies, you need to import technologies from abroad, whether it's machines or technology licenses, which have to be paid with foreign currency, because you don't have the ability to print your own currency and get it accepted by other countries. Yeah? And in order to do that, how do you get the foreign currency? Mostly through international trade. Yeah. So international trade is essential for economic development. The sleight of hand by mainstream economists is to say that therefore you need trade liberalization. No, you do not need trade liberalization. Yeah? In the beginning, you have to protect. Yeah? In the 60s and 70s, average tariff rate of countries like South Korea and Japan were 40, 50%. Yeah? I mean, today's average tariff rate is 10% for developing countries. Yeah? In the 19th century, the US had 56% of the tariff rate. Yeah? That's what you have to do in the beginning. But if you keep doing that forever, then you cannot develop, because it basically means that your producers will be able to get away with second rate, third rate, fourth rate technologies forever. Yeah? So you need this framework that gives you this staged development. Yeah? I mean, the trade liberalization may be good for some industries at any given point of time, but not for all of your economy. Yeah? And you have to use these policies to basically go with your own needs and capabilities, which means that to the person from Thai mission, yes, I mean, that's why we need policy space. Yeah? Countries need to be able to use policies that are suitable for their levels of development, their natural conditions, their vulnerability and so on, rather than being told to use the same policy, whoever you are. That's why you need the policy space. And I really don't understand how people who are in favor of free trade, free market, therefore free choice, is denying free choice to developing countries. Yeah. No, this is a very curious state of affairs. Yeah, because the developing countries say this is what is good for us. Yeah, And then rich countries say, no, you cannot be trusted to choose what is good for you. Yeah? We are going to tell you what is good for you. Yeah? And you are going to believe that we are right. Yeah? I mean, so basically the best international trade rules will be, you know, the minimum common standard, and maybe 5, 6 different bands of rules according to who you are, yeah? Rather than having one rule that, you know, applies to everyone. Yeah? And finally, the climate crisis, is climate crisis going to be different under different types of capitalism? Yeah, I would say so, because basically, you know, different types of capitalism will allow commodification of different things. Yeah, I mean, if you say, I don't know, the forest and things are national property, yeah? I mean, though something that shouldn't be part of the market economy, then you will protect that. Whereas if you say anything that can be and should be bought and sold, yeah, all properties should be made individual, yeah, private, then you will necessarily accelerate the destruction of these resources. So yeah, to the extent that different types of capitalism would allow commodification of different things, would allow the different levels of restrictions on how you can make money and so on, it will have different implications for the climate crisis and other things. Right.
So the social, was that social solidarity economy? Was that your question about the social solidarity economy?
Yeah. I mean, that's the part of, yeah, what you have to do. I mean, you know, cooperatives. I'm a big supporter of cooperatives. You know, and yeah, in Spain, the Mondragon Cooperative Corporation. So it's a collection of 250 or so cooperatives. It's the 7th largest business group in the country. Yeah? So it can work. I mean, the Danish the agricultural success was based on this dairy cooperatives that own the machines that process milk to make butter and cheese. Yeah. While the farmers own their own milk cows, yeah, and the cooperative the process the milk into butter and cheese, and then use the weight that comes out of the process to feed the pigs, which were then slaughtered in the collective the slaughterhouse to be processed into bacon, and you know, so. Yes, I mean, the cooperatives, the certain forms of the employee ownership of enterprises. I mean, some forms basically try to dilute the workers' class interest by making them behave more like the financial investors in the stock market. But other forms of employee ownership can be quite good in the restraining the power of the capital. So yeah, I mean, all the community ownership and so on, all of these will be the helpful and often necessary. But exactly what combinations that you use that differ across countries, no? Because even just to strengthen worker power, the Germans use co-determination system, the Swiss and the Finns use trade unions, yeah. I mean, other countries use other forms of the regulations to limit the power of the employers over workers. So I'm all in favor of the different types of the kind of modifications to the basic the structure of capitalism.
you know, whether Adam Smith, I mean, Smith was in the pocket of the Scottish landed elite, as you know. And so whether he's actually a kind of model kind of intellect for the social solidarity economy, I don't know. Look, we have to close now. We're running quite a little bit late. So I'm going to close. I'd like to thank Ha-Joon for his presentation. I think a lot of the themes that he's raised are going to come up again during the presentations over the remainder of this week. That I think you'll be discussing these issues again, and we look forward to further reflections on these mega trends and their impact, particularly on developing countries and the challenges it poses. So thanks to Ha-Joon. I think a round of applause for his contribution. And I have to give the floor to Ursula for some
a quick announcement.
announcements.
Thank you. So we started late, but we'd like to keep with the following schedule. So there is coffee outside if you'd like to get some, but we'd like to start at 4 with the following session on the shifty contours of economic dependency. So don't go too far. Thank you.